Thank you. Wonderful. Yes, we have a timer. We have our two esteemed speakers. Please come and join the stage. Wonderful. So I think the session we're about to embark on now is very, very interesting because we have two CTOs of some really interesting and successful companies, both with very different experience and very different views on the world of technology and how to develop and how to integrate things like data. And we are going to be talking about consistently inconsistent and constantly changing. So it's a bit of a truism to say that the only thing you can really depend on is change. And this is very, very true in the technology industries. So by way of a little background, this panel is going to kind of investigate and talk about things like mobile design, UX, personalization, product recommendations, same-day delivery services, and so some of the biggest factors contributing to e-commerce success today. But technology doesn't stand still, and neither do shoppers. So how can we future-proof e-commerce solutions across multiple channels and develop capability and adapt to trends, keeping us awake at night? So the two gentlemen here about to deep dive into the subject matter are Mohammed Ali from WeNeedOne.com and Dominic Cameron from Photobox, both the CTOs of the companies. Please welcome them to the stage. Wonderful. So, Ali, if you'd like to kick off and tell the audience a bit about yourself.
So I'm Ali, I'm a CTO. I've been in technology for the past few years now. I'm 17. Well, WeNeedOne.com is a reverse marketplace model which puts the buyers in control. It is based on the intention economy. We collect data before the consumer buys their product or service, which helps our platform grow. And we help consumers save time, money, and effort in under 15 seconds.
Yep. Very good. Thank you. Okay, over to you, Dominic.
Hello, everybody. Should I kick off with a sort of a bit of context as well at the same time? So I don't think it was part of the plan, but it's rather cute that you have in front of you the UK's youngest CTO, and I think the UK's oldest CTO. I was involved in lastminute.com 25 years ago, and clearly maybe the contrast between running technology and internet businesses then and now might be interesting to you. We'll touch on them a little bit, I guess. So I'll spend 3 or 4 minutes just for context and maybe touch on a few themes that you might want to drill into a bit more, or Ocean can sort of push us there. So the first, by the way, why am I at a millennials conference? My only other claim to fame is I have a son who's a millennial and a son who's a Gen Z. So maybe there aren't that many of you who can claim that too. I have some expertise as a parent of people like you. In fact, my youngest son is older than this young man here, which amazes me as well. So looking forward to hearing about some of Ali's experiences. Photobox, some of you may be familiar, but just in case you're not, Photobox is a group of brands. We're involved in mass customization. What that means is that we manufacture physical products, photo albums, huge posters if you want to make a holiday a photo from your holiday into a wall picture, calendars, mugs, and so on, but also greeting cards on the Moonpig brand. But mass customization, because every single product that leaves our factories around Europe is different from every single other product by definition. And we do millions and millions of products every week shipping out from our European plants. So it's European business. Basically French and UK, Spanish and German is the main businesses. My background is engineering, both going way back, BBC News, so media, lastminute.com, travel, ITV video, and now Photobox manufacturing and end-to-end, what's called digi-fizzy, right? So the digital experience of building a product on your mobile phone and then and printing it out. So we'll touch a little bit on, as we go along, on the evolution of digital businesses and touch on capacity, on capability, for which I think we have some quite strong views. Maybe we'll hit that as we go along, future-proofing businesses. And by the way, I've been at Photobox for 4 years. I actually left them last Friday, so I'm not there today. I can't speak for them. It's a fabulous business and a wonderful, wonderful team. We've sold the company. I've been involved in selling through IPOs. If you're familiar with the public sale of a company or private equity. We sold Photobox to private equity, and that was my mission for 4 years, is to prepare the company for sale. So I executed that and replaced myself, which is another CTO there now, who's a wonderful bloke. And my focus is now Asia. So I've been traveling to Asia for 30 years, and very, very interested in ecosystems of internet in Singapore, in Vietnam, in Shenzhen in China, which maybe you want to touch on as well, because from my point of view there, it's one of the most incredibly exciting spaces in the world, and some of the most dynamic change in our space is happening there. And so understanding that and showing, exploring it. I don't understand it, I'm trying to learn about it, but that's where my focus is, moving to Asia. Yeah?
Awesome, that's great, thank you. So I wondered, could we kick off with a little show of hands? Because there's kind of 3 main themes that have been suggested. Seeing as we have this expertise on the stage, this collective expertise, are people interested in learning about multi-channel, developing for multi-channel at all? Is that something? If you're interested in multi-channel, put up your hands. Lovely. How about expanding capability and that kind of more infrastructure and staffing question? Is that of interest? Capability, developing capability, going once, going twice, okay. And finally, future trends in the market. Is that something? Okay, very popular. Right, excellent, we have our answer. So number 1 is trends, number 2, multi-channel, and capability, maybe not so much, but we can touch on that.
We'll redefine it.
Okay, we'll redefine it. Okay, good plan. So obviously, as you mentioned, quite possibly the youngest CTO in the, I don't believe the oldest CTO in the UK, but there's a kind of a universe of difference between the world of technology when you started and when you started. 8 years ago, less than 1% of web traffic came from mobile devices globally. Less than 1% of web traffic 8 years ago, 8 years. Now it's over 50%. So technology is moving quicker than ever. So would either of you like to comment on what you've seen change since you started, which is going to be a very different perspective, obviously?
Well, I guess in 1997, when you launched BBC News Online, everything was different then. There was no UX, UI, user interfaces were completely different. Mobile wasn't even there then. So what's your best recommendations on how it has actually changed? Obviously, it's changed quite a bit.
Yeah, everything's different. One of the most obvious things is you had to buy hardware in those days. So we had to both equip lastminute.com in the first weeks and BBC News Online in the first weeks. We had to buy hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of equipment and put it into racking and data centers in our own sites as well as in data centers externally. And now you don't have to do that anymore. So you can build in the cloud and you can just type a line of code and have servers up in 15 seconds, 30 seconds, to either introduce a new product or to support the development efforts that require. So the barriers like that are gone. We had to invent everything in those days. So in the beginning of lastminute.com, people didn't trust credit cards online. They wanted to phone you. So I remember the first year of lastminute.com travel sales were actually people browsing the site and then phoning us saying they wanted to book the hotel because they wouldn't give us a credit card online. And that gradually shifted. But also we had to build everything ourselves. Yeah. And now the beauty is you've got so many things that you can rent or you can receive for free by exploiting open source. So what that means is the velocity of change is accelerated, right? The ease of starting and the velocity is just unbelievably different.
And I guess it's not only that, it's more people are getting used to technology, and technology is growing in the education sector. More people are getting educated. What do you think? Well, data is a big thing to me. If somebody asked me the question, would you rather have data in your bank or would you have money? I'd rather say I'd have data in my bank, because data is a big game changer in the technological field. So with lastminute.com, how do you go on about collecting data to help your platform grow and help other platforms at the same time?
So every aspect of the management of data has changed, and it's become more sensitive, more delicate a question, as well as more technologically complex a question. Yeah, right. At the beginning of lastminute.com, I think we were, Google Analytics didn't exist, right? So the ability to track was limited. So you could probably multiply by about 100 just the types of data that we can collect today relative to that first year of lastminute.com. And of course, the context in which we're collecting data is much, much more sophisticated today. So the regulatory context, with GDPR and the restrictions on what you're allowed to do and how much transparency you have to give the customer about what you're doing, and the processes that you have to prepare and document and support are way, way, way more complex, rightly so, than they were in those days, where everything was a bit of a, it was a little cowboy operation to some extent. For example, I remember the first 100,000 orders coming into lastminute.com as emails, and I remember that we, about 40 people across the company had their email inbox with the customer details, the credit card details, probably certainly the last 4 digits, and so on, just in their inboxes. Now, the world is completely different now. And of course, what you can do with the data, and what you should be doing with the data if you're operating at scale is truly stunning in terms of. So, for example, if some of you are doing, Photobox is applying artificial intelligence in many, many different ways. Obviously, when you have upwards of 10 billion photos from customers, you can do lots of wonderful things about working out who's who, what kind of things they'd like to make with their photos and so on. But you're also receiving data from marketing campaigns that you can analyze the marketing campaigns using machine learning to determine which of your 50 different hypotheses is the most likely to succeed in the next cycle. So you can reduce the amount of manual oversight of campaign alternatives and automate some of that. So these things are just completely new, Ali. I mean, I couldn't have imagined half of this stuff 10 years ago, let alone 25 years ago.
I mean, based on my own experience, I think the internet in general on mobile apps is going to just get replaced, and apps are just going to, not only do you have to download them, but they're going to be automatically there. There's not going to be the need to actually download apps. I think apps will just take over everything.
So bigger apps will disappear, but apps will be transparent. Apps will be.
They will be transparent.
Yeah.
There's an interesting initiative we're involved at Openmarket together with the GSMA, which governs all of the mobile phone networks globally, and some companies like Google, ZTE, and Samsung. It's called RCS, Rich Communication Services, and it's basically an app-like experience, but in the native messaging app of your smartphone. So, you have buttons, high-resolution images, interactivity, videos, rich media, etc. So you're able to handle most of the common interactions between a consumer and a brand without having to install any app, because a native messaging app is just so sophisticated.
Yeah, I mean, that speaks to one of your 3 themes, right? The adapting to trends. You guys, some of you have probably installed WeChat, the Tencent application. If you haven't, it's worth, obviously deploying the European version, it doesn't give you the full Chinese experience, and a lot of the integrations that exist for a Chinese user are not available to us, but still it gives you an indication, and the documentation for the developers is very accessible now, and that's probably one of the great places to see how this is changing, and where, to Ali's point, some apps, particularly on e-commerce, are just going to disappear into a kind of flow of messaging, or flow of experience that kind of anchors around your conversations instead of having to go and install an app. But I think for us here, and for complex apps, and Photobox apps are complex because, for example, we need to make sure that you can handle 500 or 600 photos at once, and then make a layout of them. And you can't do that in a web page, and you can't do that in a lightweight mini app on WeChat. But a lot of things you can do. So I think in terms of watching trends, you should be reading about what's happening in Shenzhen. You should be reading about what Alipay are doing. You should be reading about what WeChat are introducing, and understand. It's not easy. Try and get your brain around some of those differences, and why, for example, WeChat have a so-called subscription offering and a services offering for mini apps. It's really important, and it's just the kinds of things you need to drill into, and you can read about, and that's a pretty good pointer to what we'll be doing here in 5 years' time.
I totally agree. I think that's fantastic advice. The whole WeChat ecosystem is absolutely stunning in terms of providing a a completely joined-up experience. If you want, you can see if your doctor's available. You can pay for an appointment with them. You can get all the aftercare all through the WeChat app.
I'm going to give you an amazing example, which I just heard about 3 or 4 weeks ago in China. So it's a part of an Alipay thing. You know how difficult it is for us in Europe or in America to file an insurance claim for car damage. It's a pain, right? If you have an accident, you might take some photos at the time, but usually you forget, so you take them next day. You download a form, or they post you a form, you fill out the form, you send it back in, they scan it in, they make some mistakes as they're typing the information across. You get a phone call from somebody who doubts what you're telling the truth. A mechanical guy phones you to say, why are you using that garage and not that garage? And about 6 or 7 weeks later, you might have the money back for the garage repair that you've tried to organize. In China, today, if you're a customer of, I think it's not WeChat, it's the other one, Weibei, whatever it's called. So what happens is this. You have an accident in downtown Guangdong and with your car, and you take some photos of the damage of your car and their car. You put them on WeChat, or the chat platform. You message them to your insurance company. They already know your policy number, because obviously they know your phone number, so they don't need the details like that. They know who you are. And you send a picture, I think, of yourself and of the other party, just to show that so they have some audit trail of who is involved in this thing, in the accident. Forgive me if this is not quite right. It's about 11 minutes later, you receive confirmation that the claim will be accepted. And 45 minutes later, the money's on its way to your bank account to pay for the damage, which will be paid for when you go to the garage later on. So within under an hour, something like 97% of claims are processed just by messaging, right? And what's happened is the photos that you took have been mapped by artificial intelligence to see that first of all, is that your car? Yes, it's the car they think you own. Is the damage worth the car being repaired or not? Or is it too serious to write it off? And so on. And that's just staggering, right? And so if you take in that example, you multiply by kind of most of the stuff you do in a given month, and that's changing a lot of things. And it's skipping generations of processes, right? So the car claim process that Scottish Widows or AXA or whoever it is use, it dates back 30, 40, 50 years, and they've tried to improve it. They tried to take some, but those guys just jump it. They've just gone right over the top. And so that's why I think that, to your point about adapting to trends and seeing what trends are, now that's not just a prototype. That's not a proof of concept. Right now, this month, 80 million people are using that particular process. 80 million people are using that particular process. So it's only about a year old. Forgive me if some of those numbers aren't quite right. Don't quote me, please, but it's approximately right.
Amazing. I mean, that's so impressive. That's exactly the kind of quick mobile-first interaction that the millennials and centennials demand from the companies they interact with. And this is very much what RCS is going to be empowering in the very, very near future, I'd say. So Ali, we spoke a bit earlier about the importance of data and also real-time data. How do you implement this across your business?
So what we do is we collect the data before the consumer buys that product or service or is connected with the seller itself. And that is an intention economy which helps the platform collect data without even selling anything. We Need One doesn't have any middleman, so there isn't any of you don't have to hustle or haggle in person. You can do it all online with weneedone.com. And with the data that we collect, we not only grow our platform, we sell that data to other companies, businesses, and it helps them grow. And we've had a very, very great response for that.
You're mirroring very much a trend that was mentioned yesterday in the opening keynote on the marketing stage, which is all about millennials and centennials really knowing the value of their own data and thinking, why should companies get this for free, even if we get a free service or whatever? So the kind of power of leveraging one's own data is something that the new generation of consumers seem to be a bit more aware of. But do we think it's early days for that still, the whole intention economy, or where do we think that's going to go?
I think it's still very, very early for collecting data. I mean, the data market is in the billions, but it's not nowhere near in the trillions it's just not grown yet. And I believe in the upcoming next few years, it will grow it'll grow more than technology is now. So as technology grows, the need of data will grow even more.
I don't know if you guys remember, there was a company called About Me, I think, in London, which attempted to prove that people would take such a strong interest in the data set that they believed was being created around them, or that they could supplement, that they could somehow sell it to retailers. They could sort of, quite how it would work, I can't remember the different models they tried, but there must be some subscription stuff, there must be some coupons and so on. But the idea was that you would enable customers to somehow carry with them a kind of closed envelope of information, which they could say, oh, well, if you really want to look inside my envelope and discover me, make it worth my while, give me a bigger discount or something. I'm sure some people believe in that approach. I don't. I think that, but I do think that the information, we have very high expectations of what companies like us are going to be using information for. We have very high expectations on the downside, so we expect companies to get rid of our information if we don't want them to keep it. Today it's quite difficult to be sure that a company is just deleted or removed. We'll have to do that. From 18th of April next year, we all have to make that possible.
But how could we actually trust that is the main question. I mean, you never know. Companies might keep that data, even though it's protected in the Data Protection Act 90.
So you'll only trust it by time passing and believing that the industry is if you're doing the right thing. The sanctions for not doing it right are huge.
Yes.
And so, this isn't a meeting about GDPR, but some of you probably need to get your minds around GDPR, which is a new set of data compliance regulations that kick off next April. But just to give 2 examples. So the sanctions for a serious breach are extremely heavy. 4% of global turnover if there's a serious breach. Now that's just a monumental amount of money. It can be a company terminating amount of money. But the other piece is that anybody can complain. So you, Ali, could complain about me, and I would have to act on it. And so an individual can raise a complaint, and that's a lot of very scary stuff that implies. Now, I suspect that it'll become, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I suspect that it'll become more pragmatic than I've said. The law says that. So now, what I think is going to happen, to step back a minute, I started with this negative thought, right, that people expect you to get rid of their information. We also are going to expect companies to more intelligently exploit our information, we expect to be offered less crap advertising or less crap content suggestions. And we're seeing improvements all the time across that in more or less every vehicle we go to.
I'm just going to bring an example into that. So Yahoo, for example, which got sold to Verizon, they released data, the data that was hacked, obviously they had a security breach, but they sold that data to the government. Now, somebody like Yahoo, how can they actually, in Christ's sake, how can they actually do that? That's pathetic.
One of my biggest headaches at Photobox has been managing data security. It's expensive, it's complex, it's quite esoteric, and it really is annoying because it takes you off making more beautiful products, making the processes more effective, but it's just part of the game. And there's a lot of good practice, a lot of expertise around to do it now. So, but Yahoo as well was a horrible, horrible case.
Yeah, I chatted to somebody who works with the American kind of security forces on data protection at a conference last year, and they said the way we think about hackers and this kind of data breaches is that somebody breaks into your house and steals the data and runs away. But it's not really like that. It's like you're driving a car and there's somebody sitting in the back seat who's trying to steal your car all the time, and they're just sat there all the time trying to get in. So it's kind of a constant battle between hackers and CSOs.
Yeah, we're all being attacked all the time. I mean, if you're operating an e-commerce business, you're being hit by robot attacks every 4 or 5 minutes, and some of them are very complex and serious, and some of them are. But that's another story. We haven't touched maybe on some other themes. Anybody want to ask a question? And then we can rabbit on about maybe capability. I want to come back to capability, but questions
Indeed.
first?
Any questions from the audience? Yes, for these excellent CTOs. I mean, I was going to say, you kind of touched on virtualization. Oh, we have a question. Wonderful. Excellent. Okay, if you could introduce yourself to the audience as well. Thank you.
Sure. My name's Tim Gray from Holmes Miller. I just wondered if there was any thought of conflict in the panel's mind between the sharing of data and the collection of data, or the securing of data, in terms of platforms like WeChat, which seem to be gathering all of your data to make your life easy, but give a lot of your personal details out there that maybe you don't actually want to be shared.
Is Mark Zuckerberg in the house? Maybe he can tell us about privacy.
Yes, that definitely there is a pretty tough conflict, right? If you, I guess we all have to develop habits of information sharing which are relevant to the platform we're using. So we've got to be cognizant, and it's tough for everybody, to develop these ideas, but on certain platforms, don't share some stuff. On other platforms, feel comfortable doing it. And I think that brands are going to be expected to be quite transparent about several things. One is how they use their data, and the other is to give you the ability to remove it. Now, obviously, WeChat is not covered by European law. The UK government will continue to be covered by GDPR, both pre-Brexit, Brexit, and post-Brexit, so we can be confident that some of these limitations, such as they have to, a platform has to prove that they have removed information about you, and has to show the process, make the process visible to you about how it was removed.
I think even, Snapchat, obviously, they have temporary data. More platforms are doing that even more now. So I think if we do use temporary data to actually collect data, I think that's the best way to go.
Do you think that between Dominic and Ali, you have different approaches to how you actually share data?
Yeah.
I mean, millennials and Generation Z are more open to sharing their data rather than people like Dominic and myself, who are sort of slightly older.
Could you?
Well, I have various children. My 30-year-old is not very happy about sharing her information anywhere, whereas my 16-year-old is happy to share everything about all of it, practically every detail about herself online. So.
Well, I think it's the education in general. I mean, if children aren't educated about sharing their data in the right manner, these kind of issues will occur even more. So I think obviously technology can't do that, but the government, the UK, British government, or governments around the world can educate the younger generation about security, not just security in general, but how to handle and how to actually share their data. So you don't want to just give away your address online. You want them to know the cons of actually sharing their data online.
I think people's expectations change over time, right? My 30-year-old son was a fairly liberal, cheerful sharer on Facebook in his teens and at university, and then he wanted to do a cleanup operation, and it's important to him that he could do that and sort of almost redefine his identity, bring it up to date, and then get rid of some of the more embarrassing stuff. I guess you can be reasonably confident if you live in Europe and you're working, you're using European branded sites, that you'll probably over time have a pretty good control over your data. But if you use international sites, you're more exposed. Yeah.
Very, very true. So we've got less than 2 minutes on the clock. I just wondered, we touched on virtualization, big data, moving from ownership to access, the importance of data privacy, etc. If there were one or two kind of gems of advice in terms of what the audience should be looking for like future technology, what would you say it was? Where would you say they should look?
Maybe touch briefly on future-proofing, and which links to capability. I guess to future-proof, you need to stay very, very flexible, right? So you need to make sure that you invest. If technology is an important part of what you do, then you've got to make sure that your technology structure, your architecture, and your teams are able to move quickly from one issue to another. You want to minimize the amount of dependency between different parts of your technical architecture. So think of it as little islands which can be improved, changed easily, as opposed to some monolith which is inflexible. You want your teams themselves, and at Photobox we have about 30 development teams, and we try to make it possible for them to operate completely autonomously and to have their own set, each of the 30 to have their own set of objectives, fortnight by fortnight, and not having to look sideways to where other teams are at too much, decoupling, if you like. So flexibility, autonomy, because there's teams, and these teams aren't just developers. They'll have UX, they'll have a product manager, they'll have probably QA, if there's enough work for them to QA to do at that time, database people, but make sure that they are very, very clear on a simple set of objectives, and they're free to use their knowledge of their little domain to make progress as an individual team. So autonomy is critical. If you're employing millennials, and obviously all of us are, then their expectations of information and clarity, and they expect the management to give them a clear sense of context, a clear sense of the direction, and then simple instructions, if you like, simple guidance on what they're expected to do the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. They don't want too much waffle, they don't want too much context, direction, and then what we want now. And if you show them you can do that and prioritize well, you'll give them confidence and they'll stay with you.
Could you just imagine the world running just with data? No media needed, just data.
Awesome advice there. I'm afraid we have to wrap this up now, but please, if you want to chat further with Ali or Dominic, just meet them outside the door here. They would be very happy to share some of their expertise with you. I think that was a fascinating panel. Lots of great takeaways there for the audience. Please join me in thanking Dominic and Ali.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.